Welcome back to my Hunter Strategy Guide and Example Run. This is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, maybe you searched for Hunter guides and this was the part you were stuck on. I explained some of the parameters of this run and the guide in that part. So if you want to hear more about that, go ahead and watch part 1, or at least the kind of beginning segments of it. So we just went through Farm Arrays and Sky Islands, and now we are going to go across Chimney Canopy. So there's really two different chimney canopies, so to speak. There's the side that we're going to do now, which is just you go through Sky Islands and then you go through this little tiny part of Chimney Canopy, and then you come right back out into exterior, specifically the wall segment of it, which I think is like the shortest segment where you can get through 3 areas in the game. Like, it only takes a few minutes and you can say that you've passed through 3 entire areas. So here's a look at the King Vulture. I'll probably talk a little bit more about those in a bit when we get back to Chimney Canopy. We didn't see any of those, I don't think, in the previous part. We saw regular vultures a little bit. They didn't really pose any particularly big threat to us. If they spawn in that previous area where you can go down into the main part of Chimney Canopy, they can be kind of it can be kind of dicey because you're a little bit exposed. But here you can get underneath these platforms and protect yourself. You can even chuck things at them if you wish, although that might make them angrier, but it does have its use, which again I will touch on more later. Once you get here, you're pretty much home free from the vultures. They might follow you in, but it's not really great for them to do that because they don't have much maneuverability, and it's much easier for you to hit them. But once you get to the end here, you can come up and eat one of these popcorn plants. You know, it's really handy, just as I was talking about in the previous part. It's just free food. There's no killing involved. They give full pips. Even if they didn't, you could spend enough time here and get full food if you really wanted to. It would be kind of annoying. The main thing is to just look out for king vultures' laser sights. Sometimes they can be kind of hard to see, especially if you're in an area like this with a lot of background noise. Sometimes it's very faint, but just try to stay near transitions, and above all, just move around and move kind of erratically. They can be lethal. The king vultures shooting their tusks out to stab you, but if you keep moving and vary up your path a little bit, just kind of zigzagging around, they shouldn't hit you most of the time. They will kill you once in a while, but they're not that big of a deal, even though they are kind of scary. They're not your worst enemy in Hunter, I don't think. So here's the wall. You probably know it well, although you probably went in the other direction coming from 5 Pebbles. Going up the wall is arguably intended as Hunter, just because of the way it's structured, where there's uh, an echo and then 5 Pebbles right at the top, and you can duck right back out. Um, Taking one step into any other part of exterior will further cement your impression of this, probably. Like I said in the previous part, we're not going to go through most of exterior just because it's so awful. There's so many ways to die there. I remember in one of my earliest Hunter runs that I completed, I went there and I ended up dying like 40 times just because there's like spitter spiders, cyan lizards, daddy long legs, all sorts of nasty junk. The one nice thing about Hunter, if you're going in that route, in that direction, is that although there are some daddy long legs, once you get into 5 Pebbles, if you happen to go through unfortunate development, it's actually really tame in Hunter. It's really easy to get through. There's not that much rot. It's really mild. I may make an addendum video at the end if this is well enough received, just showing some of the parts that we didn't get to in this run, which there aren't really that many. It's just that segment, a lot of farm arrays, and then we're not going to see very much of subterranean in actuality. We're going to take kind of a backdoor route that I don't see talked about all that often, but I think ultimately is easier than going through subterranean normally. But anyway, going up through here isn't that big of a deal. Until you get to right at this screen, you shouldn't really see any lizards. Sometimes they duck back down into that part with the bat flies here, but by and large, it's not until you get to the next screen where it becomes a problem. And cyan lizards, they tend to pop up in pairs or more in this segment, which is really annoying. We saw a little bit of that kind of behavior in our last segment. There's a couple screens in Sky Islands where they tend to do that. They don't really do that by nature. It's just that, for example, in this segment here, they're replacing what would normally be the yellow lizards, or, I mean, they're called yellow lizards, but honestly, they're really more orange in my experience. Anyway, they occupy that outcropping that's to the left and up a little bit from here. And the cyan lizards replace those in this mode, which really sucks, as you can see. I've gotten lucky with their placement here, and I managed to kill one. Another one's like really suffering over here, and I just put it out of its misery. Unfortunately, I pushed it into that tunnel, so I had to kind of take a little bit longer route. If you can, like if the cyan lizards haven't seen you in these segments, then you want to try and take the tunnels if you can. That can backfire on you, as we're going to see a little bit later. I guess technically those lizards down there, they might have been replacing some of the blue and maybe white lizards, because there should be more up here, but maybe not, because I seem to have gotten lucky and none of them were chasing me from the left here. Sometimes it's hard to tell because when you start a cycle, sometimes the lizards or whatever creatures, they just move every which way, and where you end up finding them doesn't really represent all that much where they actually spawned. See, there's one up there, but luckily it's far enough out of the way where it doesn't seem to have perceived me, which I find is pretty rare. Cyan lizards are like some of the most perceptive lizards out there. They'll spot you from a mile away and they'll like never give up, even if you try and juke them. So that could have been really bad right there. Luckily I got a good shot off. If you get one spear into cyan lizards, the nice thing about them is, as I pushed them off the ledge there, I forgot about that. The nice thing is, if you can get at least one shot on them, it really cripples them. They'll kind of like spray around aimlessly, and it really messes them up. I think they can probably still kill you, but they're much easier to just get around. You don't necessarily have to finish them off. Especially if there's danger of more getting up in your face. I did see a vulture shadow there, but I don't remember it actually coming at me in this part. Sometimes vultures can be kind of fluky here in the wall. I may be wrong, but I think in Survivor, vultures never spawn, be it kings or regular ones, in the wall. Can't really remember. One thing we haven't seen much of here is dropwigs. They can appear, they can appear on the wall in Survivor as well. Usually I see at least one. They're more prevalent here, but I didn't see that lizard there apparently. But luckily, that's kind of the nice thing about the wall, is sometimes lizards will just mess up and fall down. Before I forget, let me just mention here, because we're going to see it in a bit. Once you get into this zone here, this specific zone, like after you've transitioned out of the outcropping with the either yellow or cyan lizards. Uh, Anywhere upward from here is not affected by rain. So if you come up here and you find that there's like 3 white lizards and they're not really in a place where you can throw rocks at them very easily, what you can do is you can just wait them out. Because if you haven't noticed, like, because you might have been panicking while this is happening, when the rain comes, any creatures, they no longer will hunt you. They will actually, like, if you try and run past them, they will just run past you as well. They won't kill you. Not to my knowledge, not in my experience. And they don't understand that rain doesn't affect this part of the wall or, that one screen in Sky Islands and communications array, which doesn't really serve any purpose because even if you get up there, the rain will never end and you can't get back down. So it's kind of useless, but it's actually a useful mechanic here because the creatures will all go for their hiding places and you can just go up and you can go up all the way in one shot into Five Pebbles Chamber and then rest up there and then come back down. So in that way you can save time and cycles with Hunter. It's something I definitely recommend doing. Sometimes I do get impatient and I don't want to wait. Like if I have a particularly long cycle, I'll just get impatient and try and fight the lizards anyway, which probably isn't the best idea, especially if you're going for like low death runs or whatever. I mean, if you're going for speed, then sure. But I would recommend, especially if you had a tough time getting past the cyan lizards, or even if you're playing Survivor and you had a tough time getting past the yellow-orange lizards, then it's something good that you can do. I didn't really touch much upon like how you can get up the wall without going over to the left and into that lizard nest. I mean, you probably saw, but you can go back and see how I placed some of those spears along the wall, and you can climb up that way. Something that's arguably easier is you can dip down into the underhang, and not always, but some of the time there will be grapple worms just before that one shelter that's down there. Try not to go that far because it's difficult to get back, if not outright impossible. But if you just go in a little bit past that long passage that's down there at the very bottom of the wall, and you go and grab a grapple worm, you can bring it back up here and it serves the same purpose. You can get up that really treacherous part of the wall. Once you bring it into this screen, it will become pacified because of the echo that's up and to the left through that transition. It's easy to think that it has died, but that's not the case. It's just that same mechanic that makes creatures go away when there's an echo present. I'm going to speed up through here because this whole entire segment, talking to Five Pebbles and just running through this part back and forth, takes like a million years. But yeah, you can bring your grapple worm with you if you are one of those players that really just feels like naked without a grapple worm. I think it's kind of more trouble than it's worth, and it's not that useful at any other part of the run, in my experience. I mean, you might be able to save yourself from a bad jump somewhere, but like when you're in these 0G segments, having a grapple worm kind of sucks. So as you can see here, Five Pebbles does grab the green neuron and remark on it, and then he gives it back to you, and that's the helped Five Pebbles objective that you get at the end. So if you're going for all objectives like I am here, this is something that you absolutely must do. And then the other nice thing is that Five Pebbles gives you free bonus cycles. It's like 6 or 7 or so. That's really useful. It's something that if you want to complete a Hunter run, you pretty much have to do. Because, I mean, you can actually get max karma and ascend as Hunter without ever coming up here, but you have to get like literally every other echo in order to make up for it, because there's 5 pebbles up here and then we're going to get this other echo, 2 for 1 deal, which is really handy. So something else that I did that you might have seen briefly is I dipped into the main body of Five Pebbles just real quick, and I grabbed a neuron that was flying around. Then I came back, and neurons are uh, they operate a little bit differently from like other food sources in how they interact with your stomach. So you have to uh, if you go up the wall, try and remember to leave one food pip free, because then you can eat the neuron right away once you get it. And the reason that's important is we're going to see in a little bit. So the first time I went back through here, I ate the neuron, everything was fine. And then I got all the way down here, and I'm going to go back into normal speed for a second, see if you can spot what is about to go wrong. Maybe if you have a good eye. I certainly didn't. So yeah, and that could have been avoided just by using that little arrow transition at the bottom there. So lesson learned. I mean, that can backfire too, but it has a much lower chance of being a problem because you can just juke right back up. So the problem here is that I forgot about it. It cut this part out a little bit, and I didn't care enough to edit it back in. But what happened was I left the neuron in the shelter, and that is going to hinder me for the entire rest of the run because I can't see in the dark. Now, I'm experienced enough at this game that I can kind of go around in the dark, like just on memory and by using the map, but uh, it's really a pain in the ass, especially going the drainage system route because you come out in a really dark area, which you would have to go through anyway, but it's just especially stings, all things considered. Um, so going back down the wall generally isn't all that bad, aside from the occasional lizard that appears just off screen. But even if you run into some cyan lizards, you can just barrel on down. It's just like in Survivor. It's not all that bad. And then, I mean, in pretty much any scenario, you're going to be going back through Chimney Canopy, which is probably how you got here. Like I said, we're not going to go through the rest of exterior. I guess you could do that if you wanted. Just as the crow flies, like uh, going through exterior, then memory crypts, the rest of the shaded citadel, then going right on down to shoreline and popping out right where looks to the moon is. I think that probably does save time, but just going through that path is just not fun at all. I would recommend, especially if you're a beginner, just to go back down through Chimney Canopy, which is what we're going to do here. Um, I mean, like memory crypts, and as you're going to see later, all of Shaded Citadel aren't really that much worse on Hunter. It's just exterior that is awful. Um, you could technically go through Five Pebbles backwards if you wanted. I think that that's kind of boring, but otherwise it's probably pretty safe. You would just go through. I mean, you can go through uh, whatchamacallit, the place with all the rot. Um, and like I said, the rot isn't as bad, but it's when you're going through backwards, you're kind of going blind in a lot of aspects. It's more designed to go through the normal way. And you have to make kind of leaps of faith if you don't have the whole place like absolutely memorized. But you can just go back through the place with all the like electric fences, or they're not really fences, they're like transformers, um, and then back down. And that's probably not too bad, but the issue there is you have to still go through part of the underhang and all of the leg, and that's going to suck all the same. There are some paths that make the leg not so bad that I think are kind of unintuitive that I've discovered more in recent times. Um, like I said, maybe I'll make a video about that later. But on the whole, there's really just no benefit through going exterior, aside from like a little bit of speed maybe in like an all objective run. But if you're doing like I was talking about in the last video and you just want to maybe do like an ascend only run first, there's absolutely no reason to go anywhere close to that part of the map, or like shoreline for that matter, unless you wanted to go down to ascend that way. But I think that's way harder in that situation rather than just going back across Chimney Canopy through Sky Islands again and then down into Farm Arrays and just going over that one patch of worm grass. But anyway, once you get back down to the bottom of the wall, it's good to rest in that one shelter again, as you really don't want to go through all of that trek through the top of the wall again. So we should talk about that one shelter midway up the wall, and this applies to like any mode, I guess. Because of that mechanic of the way that the wall works with rain at the top, that one shelter in the middle is like sort of useless, all things considered. The only way that it sucks is when you die on the way back down and then you have to go through like all of the wall again. And that's doubly so if you have to visit the Echo on your way back. So I would recommend that if for whatever reason you do want to rest at that midway up shelter, that you get the Echo on the way up, and then that's like much less distance that you have to go back through, and then you can go visit Five Pebbles and then come back that way. I'm just going to speed through a lot of this upcoming part of Chimney Canopy that we already went through, because there's a lot of just kind of waiting around, and it's redundant from what we've already seen. It's just in reverse. Also, I took a few days off in between recording the first and second half of this, so I may repeat some things. I apologize if I do. Like I believe I mentioned before, the only real hazard in this part up here, before the central area, are mostly king vultures. Some regular ones do appear. And I have gotten a mask from hanging out in this exact zone right here, and then when they fly down to the lower part, you just throw a spear at them, and if it looks like they're going to shoot their junk at you, then you can just jet through the tunnel on your left, or on your right. I think you can do it from the other side. But the Echo is up here. This is the Echo that I find most often. Like when I get to it, I might not necessarily have the right karma for it to appear. I don't believe I mentioned this before, but in Hunter, you only have to visit an area. Like in Survivor, you have to visit an area where an Echo is, or like close to it, and then you have to come back on the next cycle in order to visit the Echo. But Hunter can just visit them right away as long as he has max karma. I've read that you can have like one below max karma on some of them, but in my experience that's not true. I've tried it on most of the Echoes. I mean, the one just inside Subterranean from the Farm Arrays side, and the one next to Five Pebbles has no requirement. You could have like minimum karma and they'll always appear. But this one, the one in Sky Islands, the one in Farm Arrays at the bottom, and the one in Shade Citadel all require max karma, or maybe one below. I don't really know. But I wouldn't bank on it if I were you. Anyway, with Chimney Canopy, I have gone in both directions through the entire thing as Hunter, and it's easier going down, definitely. I mean, pretty much any zone in this game that like has verticality to it, it's going to be easier if you're going down. So that's not really like any kind of revelatory statement. You can just drop down, and like the king vultures aren't that big of a deal on that last little climb, whereas it's kind of hell getting up. And why would you want to go up Chimney Canopy in Hunter? Well, if you go the outskirts route in the beginning, and you want to visit Five Pebbles immediately, which is probably the best idea, then you pretty much have no choice but to go up through Chimney Canopy. The only other option is going through like Shaded Citadel and then getting to Exterior that way. It's not that bad. It's actually worse having to go through Industrial Complex, because there's, I think, this isn't really a scientific statement, but I feel like, uh, per square foot, it's probably like you get more cyan lizards in Industrial Complex in like high impact places than you do here in Chimney Canopy. I mean, you do sometimes see cyans like near the top, but I find that the way that the creatures interact, like I was talking about, is like the vultures will kind of keep them in check, and vice versa in a certain sense, because they'll distract the vultures. So that can work in your favor. Scavengers are sometimes an issue in Chimney Canopy, mainly if you go like kind of the other route. So like, unfortunately, I've lost my little battle with this white lizard here, and that sucks. But so let's say you're coming from the industrial complex side, and you go like normally if you want to save time, you just go like a couple screens in, and then you go up into like an interior tunnel, and then you can get right up into that zone that I was just in before I died. But there's a more roundabout way of going about it, which I think is like, I haven't really watched many people go through Chimney Canopy for like their first time to know if this is true, but I feel like most players probably go for that longer route just because it's like, it seemed more logical the way you're going through it. And there's a lot of like big jumps that you have to make, big pounces across like the giant chimney stacks. And you can bypass all of that, but if you go through that route, I find you encounter more scavengers, so I think there's really no benefit to going there as Hunter. Um, but anyway, here you see the perils of... so if you go down this big drop in Chimney Canopy here that I'm about to come back up to again, and you get to the 3 triple line tunnels that are on like the right side of the screen, sort of. If you go through, I think it's like the middle one, yeah, the middle one, you can get to a shelter that way. So, and that leads to that side area that is mostly optional. But you can, from this side, you can go and rest there if you really want to. I think, although I did say that it's not that big of a deal trying to preserve cycles too much, um, I would say, like, in certain areas like Chimney Canopy, it's best to try and go through it all in one go. Because you're not going to get caramel walled at this part too much, I don't think. It's more so in the other direction, like if you come from Sky Islands and your karma is too low, you can get kind of screwed. But like here, I recommend just trying to do it all in one fell swoop, and you can like save a cycle that way. It's the same in getting a little bit ahead of ourselves shoreline. I would say you should try and stretch it out a little bit. There's certain other parts where I think it's good to try and go for the gold, which I'll try and bring up as I go. But, in this run and in many of my runs, I've had many cycles left over. It's worth noting that when you run out of cycles as Hunter, you don't actually like instantly die. What happens is Hunter weakens. I think it's sort of like when you starve yourself. I've never actually gotten to the lowest cycle in Hunter, not even as like an experiment. But that's how I understand it is, and maybe that's completely false. You should probably not take my word for it. But what I do know is that when you die while you're in that state, that's when Hunter ends. So if I didn't explain that clearly before, that is what the consequence of the cycle limit is. It's not just you get game over like abstractly, so to speak. And you get this sad little screen like you do when you die, but it's a little bit different for Hunter. Um, Hunter has actually like custom cutscenes for like the ending and everything, but here in the PC version, you can't get them unless you have the Soon trademark mod installed, which I did have installed for a while. I don't have it right now for whatever reason. I had a bunch of like custom regions installed for a while, and then I wanted to wipe it clear, and I just like reinstalled the entire game and then just restored my save. So I don't have all the like little quality of life benefits, but you may want to. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a fix pack, so you can, if you want to use a controller, like I use a PS4 controller, and you want to do slides on the D-pad, you might want to install that one fix pack that does that, because otherwise you have to use the analog stick, and if you like using the D-pad just for general movement, it's kind of awkward to switch back and forth between the two. Seems like most people use keyboards, most of the high-end players do, although I've heard that like the absolute like top speedrunner uses a controller, which I think is I I'm generally not somebody who dislikes playing on a keyboard, even for like console games on emulator, but for some reason, Rain World on a keyboard just feels kind of gross. The upside to playing on a keyboard is that you can map all the different things like slides and rolls, as far as I understand. I've never done it, but that makes it easier to do all the advanced movement. But as you can see here, with this run, you don't need any of that, so to speak. The one thing that I don't do here that is, I think is maybe good to practice is doing tunnel boosts. Like just when you kind of like uh, have just turned a corner in a tunnel, if you hit the jump button, which normally slows you down inside of tunnels, but if you do it around a corner and like kick off the wall kind of, it actually gives you a gigantic boost. And I don't do it at all here, but in retrospect, I probably should have showed it off a little bit because you know you save a little bit of time here and there. It's not so much useful here in Chimney Canopy because there's not that many like tunnels to hide in. There's just a lot of these arrow tunnels and like they're kind of maze-like in that regard. This is typically not as many white lizards as you'll see here. I mean, you'll see like one in like every area of this middle section, I think. That's fairly common, but it's rare that they all group up like this. Like they do in the wall, which is more common to have like 3 on the screen, which is pretty bogus. And then this area down here, just past this long tunnel, that those 3 lines up there don't actually lead to anything. That might be where one of the colored pearls is, or there's just like a regular pearl or something. So you can grab one if you want. If you anticipate having to go through Scavengerville, you can do that. But like, if you're going through garbage waste, you're going to find pearls on the ground anyway. So you don't really have to go out of your way for colored pearls. The only ones that I grab sometimes are like coming up in an industrial complex because the blue one is like right out in the open. They're not worth anything more than regular pearls, though. I've read in some places that people will say they are worth more to scavengers than regular pearls, but that's actually not true. But anyway, I recommend resting at this shelter because this isn't one of those areas where there's like a shelter right on the other side of the Karma Gate and like one right before it, like just together for some reason. I'm sure there's like a logical reason for them doing that, but it always kind of confuses me. Like, why would I want to rest in the previous one? But you know, there's larvae here that you can eat if you're not quite full. They give you a full pip even as hunter, which is nice. But that does it for now. Thanks for watching. We'll get into Industrial Complex next time. It's going to get a little ugly. I hope you'll join me.